Rob Venn here, and today we're going to be looking at page 54 from the big issue. This is one of the ones we haven't really had much time to go over in class. Some of you have, but some of you haven't. Okay, now this is one of the last pages in the magazine. As you can see, it's called My Pitch. So this is something they do regularly, interviewing a different person every issue. This is Donato Barbieri, who unfortunately died recently. Now, like we talked about with the other page, not really technically a running department head, but for lack of a better name we'll call it that, because it's identifying the entire magazine rather than just one particular section. This is definitely running department head, My Pitch. This is something that's a regular, it's not a feature, it's in every issue. Again, sidebar again over here, moment in time is called, that's sort of like a running department head, I guess. The big issue, picture, going supersonic. Well, obviously that's a pun on the Oasis song. April 1994, Oasis name-checked the big issue in their debut single as both band and magazine go supersonic. Again, there's a drop shadow, that's the skeuomorphism again. Yellow and red, good contrasting colours, helps make that pop. Red, remember, is a sort of like a house style colour of the big issue, as it links in with the tabards they wear, and you know, all this down here as well. Look, red being repeated all the way through it. Okay, remember, lines like this are called rules, not lines. This one's got a 4-column grid with rules separating each column, which is slightly different to the last one we looked at. But other things are similar. Your body text is in the same font. Notice it's left justified instead of center justified, so it's got a different layout. But it has got the drop capital. It's still got your folios down here. It's got your byline, photo credit down here as well, instead of in the gutter like it had before. Borders and gutters, remember, same thing. Folio down here, same as in the other one. So the house style, the layout, is very much the same as it was before. Same use of fonts here. Again, this sans serif display font, which looks like Century Gothic, or Johnston, which is the one that's used in the Underground. And of course, this relates to Victoria Station, which is part of the London Transport Network, Transport for London. So it's their font, Johnston. Anchorage here, if we've got a picture of some guy handing out big issues, and then it says Donato Barbieri 70, we're assuming it's him. That's Anchorage, it's Roland Barthes, isn't it? It's telling us where he is, London, Victoria Station, London. Okay, so that's Anchorage, is helping us to understand what the picture is. Picture looks very much like it's been staged. In terms of the semiotics here, it's quite interesting in that we've got this ironic juxtaposition of the homeless man handing out copies of the big issue in front of this advert for another magazine called Porter, which I'm assuming is a much more upmarket kind of lifestyle magazine, which is available from W.H. Smith's. So that's a completely different distribution model for a much more typical generic kind of lifestyle magazine. Anyway, what else can we talk about semiotic wise? I think this is a good one. On My Pitch, notice that this logo looks very much like the kind of pin you use for locations on Google Maps. So, you know, it's telling you where you can find him. So it's got an intertextual link there. Remember, postmodernism, Jean Baudrillard, term intertextuality was coined by Julia Kristeva. On My Pitch, ellipsis. I'm in Victoria Station Monday to Friday from 7 AM till 2 PM, so that's where you're going to go and be able to find him. Notice how red and italics are used to draw attention. Questions are in a different, you know, they're bold and they're larger and they're all caps to separate them from the answers. So facts about me. This is interesting in this humanizing him. It's telling us he's more than just a homeless person. It's breaking away from those stereotypes. So, you know, someone like Stuart Hall would talk about the fact that Stereotypes tend to reduce people to a few simple characteristics or traits, and the stereotyping tends to happen where there are inequalities of power, so it's subordinate or excluded groups who are differentiated as other, which of course other being a term by Edward Said. So trying to, humanise him so he's not just othered. Where I like to go, the British Museum. There's so much to see and explore. It's a wonderful place and a wonderful city. It is indeed. Highly recommend the British Museum if you've never been there. Also, free. So, a good place to go and find some free entertainment. Important if you're poor. My unusual hobby, coin collecting. I've been collecting since I was a boy. My favourite coins were the British ones. I had nothing valuable, but they were special to me. That's an interesting thing to talk about. If you were looking at, say, a negotiated or oppositional reading to this from a Stuart Hall point of view, you might argue that, if you collected enough coins, you wouldn't be homeless. But the preferred reading is, of course, that he is more than just his, his homelessness. He's more than just his financial situation. He's got, interests in life. He's got a personality. He's not just someone you should, completely ignore. What's the article talking about? I'm still alive. Sadly ironic. I'm still alive after all my troubles. That's what I like to tell people. I've been through the mill, but I'm still standing, and that's the important thing. I've been selling the magazine here at Victoria Station since January this year, and it's been good for me. I've been homeless in London for a few months. Before that, I left Italy in September last year. I left Italy because life had become very difficult for me there, and I needed a fresh start. So London seemed like a good place to come because I've lived here many years ago as a younger man. I grew up in Turin, in the north, a very industrial place, where they make the Fiat cars. Not many tourists, but a good place anyway. When I was a child, I grew up in an orphanage, and I was beaten up there by the nuns and the priests. Later, when I went home, I was beaten up by my stepfather, so my troubles began. I moved around a lot. I went to Australia as a young man. I worked as a fitter and a metal worker there, when I worked in the nickel mines. Australians are rough people, big drinkers, but I got on well there. I came to London in the mid-70s and worked as a waiter for a couple of years. Then I worked on a cruise liner, a P&O ship, before going back to Italy to become a salesman for a time. But life became hard because of a relationship with a woman. I would rather not explain. So I came back to London for a new start. It was difficult at first. I slept outside, then found a shelter at a Methodist church in Chelsea. Then when I started selling the big issue, I found it gave an old man like me a sense of purpose again. See up here? Pull quote. That's the title of the article. It's pulled from here. That's what it's called, pull quote. In February, I began to share a room in Whitechapel, so things are getting better. I had a fantastic pitch here inside Victoria Station, organised by the Big Issue and Network Rail. The nice people in Cafe Nero bring me a cappuccino each morning, and I really enjoy speaking to my wonderful customers. So life is good after all. I'm still alive. Now, again, this is about humanising these people who, society tends to stereotype and ignore. We could also bring in here the ideas of Identity by David Gauntlet. The idea that the media provide us with tools and resources that we use to construct our identity. You could argue that, to a certain extent, Donato was constructing his identity in terms of being a big issue salesman. In a sense, it gave him purpose. It gave him, a meaning to his life, and it helped him to get out of poverty. And David Gauntlet also talked about in the past, the media tended to convey singular, straightforward messages about ideal types of male and female identities. But the media today gives us a more diverse range of stars, icons, and characters we can pick up and mix our identities from. Now, I'm not saying that people are going to be looking at Donato as an ideal self in many ways, or an ideal partner or anything like that. I mean, he's after all homeless, and nobody aspires to that. But in terms of someone who is, really trying to do something to better themselves, that is inspirational. That is something we can look up to. We've also got here someone who's an immigrant into this country, and of course they've been very much demonized lately. We can look at Stanley Cohen's ideas of moral panics and folk devils. There's all sorts of, horrible racism against people claiming they're over here and they're claiming our benefits and all this kind of stuff, all of which are completely untrue. But instead here we've got someone who is making something of themselves. You know, they found themselves in a tough situation and they're trying to restart their life again through whatever means necessary. You know, he's not relying on charity. He's, you know, working his way out of his poverty. So quite good in terms of representations in that respect. What else can we talk about though? General things with the big issue. I mean, we can be talking about Power and Media Industries by Karen and Seaton, and the idea that the media industry is controlled by a small number of companies, primarily driven by the logic of profit and power. And again, if we bring this back in, again, look, we got Donato back on here. You know, so it's linking with this. Hello, my name is Donato. I'm honoured to feature in the 25th anniversary edition of The Big Issue. It's made a big difference in my life when I needed it. I worked it over when I came to London for a fresh start. Now I have a roof on my head, a fantastic pitch inside Victoria Station. Read more of my story on page 58. So that's, again, linking later on. But the key point we're looking at here is in terms of Power and Media Industries. The Big Issue is not there to make a profit for its owners. It's there to make a profit for its sellers. Yeah, it's a charity. Well, it's not really a charity as much as anything. It's a foundation that's about trying to help people. Again, we believe in a hand up, not a handout. That's why our sellers buy every copy of the magazine for £1.25 and sell it for £2.50. It's helping people to help themselves. So they're not really there to make money for the Big Issue. They're not there to control and manipulate people. That's not to say, however, they aren't sort of like promoting a message. They have got a message that they want people to get. So again, we can bring in preferred negotiated oppositional readings, which we can bring from Stuart Hall. You know, they want to change the idea that homeless people are, you know, aren't really people, I guess. Stuart Hall talked about the idea of stereotyping as a form of representation reduces people to a few simple characteristics or traits, and that those stereotypes tend to occur when there are inequalities of power and subordinate or excluded groups constructed as other or different. This is doing the opposite. It's trying to make people see, these homeless people seem like people. It's trying to not other them, if you will. So, in terms of regulation, it doesn't really apply to regulation, I guess. Not really an issue for this. I suppose you could be talking about maybe David Hesmer-Gulch and cultural industries. He talks about the idea that cultural industry companies try to minimize risk and maximize audiences by formatting their cultural products through the use of styles and genres and serials. Well, stars, we've got Matt Healy, is it, or 1975 on the front cover here. We've got, is that Noel Gallagher? Yeah, I think it is, yeah. They're stars, so they're attracting people to read the magazine. So, you know, it's, you could bring in Katz and Lagerfeld and Two-Step Flow model here, I guess, with role models influencing people to want to read it. I mean, in terms of horizontal and vertical integration, not really an issue with the Big Issue, to be honest. Hesmer-Gulch also talked about the radical potential of the internet being contained to some extent by its partial incorporation into a large profit-orientated set of cultural industries. Well, we're not talking about the internet here, but in terms of magazines, the Big Issue is pretty radical. It's not like your typical magazines. It's trying to do something very different. It's, what's the word we're looking for? It's bucking the system. It's, you know, it's doing something completely different. I mean, up here, look, it says publishing revolution. It's completely unlike any other magazine on the market because it's not there to make profit. It's not there for power. It's there to help people. It's got a philanthropic purpose, not a commercial one, I guess, if you look at it that way. I think that's pretty much it for that. I think there's not an awful lot else on there to talk about, I don't think. If you've got any questions, you know where to find me. Hopefully over the next few days I'll try and do some more videos like this if I've got the time. But if you've got any questions, you know where to find me.